It's August 17th, 2020, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count them up. Number 1, Trump administration continues to escalate conflict with, checks notes, Postal Service. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Glad you could join me. So, I know I talked about this one last time, but there have been some developments in the past 2 weeks. Trump's, we can stop that. Trump's efforts to undermine the post office do predate the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, but just last week, he seemed to admit that his opposition to the post office is part of an attempt to prevent Americans from voting by mail in the upcoming general election, which we all knew already. But, you know, it's like when you're a kid and you steal one of your dad's beers out of the fridge. He notices it's missing. He knows you did it, but he just needs you to say it. During a press conference and also a Fox Business interview last week, Trump said essentially the same thing, that the Postal Service needs billions of dollars in emergency funding in order to eliminate a backlog of undelivered mail and prepare for the increased volume created by mail-in ballots. But if it doesn't get that funding, a mail-in election wouldn't be possible. And wouldn't that be a shame? Congressional Democrats have proposed $25 billion in additional funding to the Postal Service, an amount that was requested by the Postal Service's Board of Governors, with $3.5 billion of that specifically designated to support mail-in voting. Trump says funding mail-in voting would be a bad thing because voting by mail is vulnerable to tampering and would result in a fraudulent election. Now, there's no evidence whatsoever to back that up, which is probably why Trump said it in the first place. It's no secret that Trump fears he will lose a mail-in election, or really any election where it's easier for more people to vote. He's said as much in public multiple times, complaining that widespread voting by mail would make it impossible for him and other Republicans to win. Trump's opposition to emergency funding isn't the only development in this story. In the cities of Portland and Eugene, Oregon, as well as in New York City, people have reported mailboxes being removed and hauled away. And according to NBC News, the Postal Service is planning to remove 671 high-volume mail sorting machines from facilities around the country. According to spokespeople for the Postal Service, these measures are nothing to be alarmed over and are simply the result of reduced mail volume due to the coronavirus pandemic and routine business adjustments designed to cut costs. Removing mailboxes and sorting machines because of reduced mail volume when there are backlogs of undelivered mail in post offices across the country and a massive increase in volume anticipated in just a few more months. You know, that, I don't know, it sounds legit to me. But this attempt to destroy the post office by Trump and his Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, who was a top fundraiser for Trump in the GOP before he was appointed to his present job, doesn't just threaten the ability of millions of Americans to vote in the upcoming election. You've probably seen stories on social media of people reporting that expected packages have arrived days or even weeks late. And some of these packages include time-sensitive things like medication. There are literally lives being put at risk by the actions of this administration. Also, Trump can suppress voter turnout to increase his odds at winning re-election. Now, to my fellow Americans watching this, I'm going to talk just to you. Do you know where your representatives stand on this? Have you called or emailed your member of Congress or your senators and told them that funding the post office and having it operating at peak efficiency, meaning that the mail is getting delivered on time, not that they're saving a bunch of money, particularly right now, is an absolute must. And if you haven't done that, now might be a good time to do that. If you don't know who your representatives or senators are, guess what? I put a link in the description of this video to a website that will help you find out. You just type in your street address and it'll tell you who your senators are, who your representative is, and how to get in touch with them, what their websites are, what their social media accounts are. And if you don't know what to say to your member of Congress or your senator, maybe this will give you an idea, because I wrote to my member of Congress and my senators today, and this is the letter that I wrote, or the email actually that I wrote, to be technical about it, to my representative, my member of Congress, David Trone. And I'll just read it really quickly. It says, "I'm a constituent from Sharpsburg, and I have been gratified to see your recent support for the United States Postal Service. I am deeply concerned about the cynical, self-serving, and undemocratic attacks being launched against the Postal Service by the President, his administration, and his allies in Congress. As a resident of a small town in a rural area, I know how vital the Postal Service is. Myself, my family, and my neighbors rely on the Postal Service to keep us connected to the larger world, to obtain goods that aren't readily available at nearby locations, and to receive necessities that can't be gotten any other way, including medication and support checks. I urge you to continue to fight to defend the Postal Service and everyone who depends on it, and to stand strong against the current administration and its allies as they seek to increase their own power and fortunes at the cost of our democracy and the common good. Thank you again for your support on this matter. Steve Shives, Sharpsburg, Maryland." And some of you might be saying, well, what if my representative doesn't support increasing the funding for the post office? What if my representative or my senators are Republicans? Well, I went ahead and wrote a sample letter for what you might say to them as well. You could write them something like, "Dear Representative," whatever their name is, Representative Wrongface, "I am a constituent from Sharpsburg, and I'm writing to urge you," or you wouldn't say Sharpsburg, of course, you'd say wherever you're from. You got to keep ahead of me here. "I'm writing to urge you to reconsider your position regarding emergency funding of the United States Postal Service. I have been gravely concerned in recent weeks, not only by the rhetoric from the president and others that seems designed to undermine confidence in the Postal Service in general, and in the process of mail-in voting in particular, but also by reports of mailboxes being removed and high-capacity sorting machines being shut down at post offices across the country, apparently for no legitimate reason. As a resident of a small town in a rural area, I know how vital the Postal Service is." This part will sound familiar to you. It's the same as the second paragraph in the first letter. So I'll just skip to the third paragraph, where I say, "I urge you to defend the Postal Service for the sake of all of us who depend on it, and this year especially for the sake of our democracy. Thank you for your consideration." And then there's my name. The first one I did actually send to my representative. The second, of course, is just a sample. And I also wrote to both my senators. I didn't just write to my member of Congress. I also wrote to both my state senators. And as you can see from my sample letters there, for my examples, it doesn't have to be a long message. And it shouldn't be. It should be one page at most. And just tell them who you are, where you're from, so they know you're a constituent. Tell them what you're writing about, and tell them that in this case, for the Postal Service, that you think they should support emergency funding of the Postal Service and why. And that's it. And don't just rewrite what I wrote. That's just an example. Just take that as a template and make it your own. And honestly, I would love if every one of my American viewers who are watching this right now would do this, would write to your member of Congress and would write to your senators. And you might not think that it makes a difference, but it can. And if more of us did it more often, I think it would make even more of a difference than it does. Anyway, number 2, birtherism mutates to attack Kamala Harris. So Trump's attacks on the post office go back a while, but last week after Joe Biden announced his running mate, Trump reached way back and dusted off an old favorite that goes back to several years before this whole fucking nightmare began. The birther conspiracy theory. Only this time, instead of President Barack Obama, the target is Senator and newly minted vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Last week, Trump told reporters that he had heard that Senator Harris did not meet the constitutional requirements to serve as vice president, but he added that he didn't know if it was true or not. He just heard about it, and that he would take a look. First of all, what does he mean he'll take a look. What's he going to do? Read the Constitution? Like he'd ever do that. The Constitution says that in order to serve as president or vice president, a person must be a natural-born citizen of the United States. It also says that the only thing you have to do in order to be a natural-born citizen of the United States is be born in the United States. Kamala Harris was born in Oakland, which is in California, which has been one of the United States since 1850. So I think she qualifies as a natural-born citizen. And this particular strain of birtherism originated with the publication of a Newsweek piece written by law professor and failed Republican political candidate John Eastman. In the article, Eastman proposes that Harris might not be eligible for the vice presidency because neither of her parents were citizens of the United States at the time of her birth. Eastman himself admits that this challenge to Harris's natural-born citizenship rests on an interpretation of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution that is now decades out of date, and ends by predicting that his argument won't be taken seriously by many people, but apparently it was good enough for the citizens of Trumpland. Even before he questioned her eligibility to serve in the office she's now seeking, Trump attacked Harris by labeling her phony, which... I mean, is there a more transparent example in American politics of the pot calling the kettle black than Donald Trump accusing someone else of being phony? In the long, colorful, frequently embarrassing history of American politics, has there ever been a phonier politician than Donald Trump? And it's not just that Trump himself is a phony, it's that he propagates his phoniness to an audience of millions through social media. So you know what? I'm in a call to action mood this time around for some reason. So let's fight fire with fire. Let's make some memes. If you're watching me right now and you feel like it, because obviously I have no control over you, but if you feel like it, why don't we make some memes? Make a meme responding to Trump's racist attacks on Kamala Harris. It can be informative. It can be funny. It can just be a photo of Trump with the text, "Our president is a racist liar" on it. Make it, share it on social media, and let me know about it. You can tweet it at me, at Steve_Shives. You can leave a comment on the Patreon post of this video if you want, if you are a Patreon patron. Or you can leave it as a comment on this video when the live stream is archived. Or what? Just let me know about it. Make your memes, share them on social media, send me a link. And if enough of you do this, I will share some of my favorites in the post show of the next episode of the Facepalm 5. And if you don't do it, I'll just never mention it again. But if you want your meme to be shown on the next show, you have to have shared it on social media, not just sent it to me, okay? That's the deal. Sound good? I'm not paying attention to the live chat, but I'm assuming you're all going absolutely bonkers for this fantastic idea. So, good. Number 3, child's murder co-opted to attack Black Lives Matter movement. Cannon Hinant, a 5-year-old boy from Wilson, North Carolina, was shot and killed last week. And that is a tragedy, and it's difficult to fathom a tragedy like that unless you have experienced something similar. And it's a trending topic on social media for the past several days. Not so much because of how tragic it is, though, but because of how some people have sought to use this tragedy to shame or silence those who have been speaking out about other tragedies. Many of the social media posts being made in reference to the killing of Cannon Hinant aren't expressing outrage over his killing, but rather outrage over the fact that people aren't more outraged about it. For example, blogger, podcaster, and general-purpose right-wing dipshit Matt Walsh tweeted about Cannon's murder, saying that if the races of the victim and the perpetrator were reversed, in other words, the way it actually happened was Cannon was white and the man who shot him is black. But if those races were flipped, then Matt Walsh says this would be the only thing anyone talks about for the next month. This idea that the murder of a child is being minimized because it doesn't fit into a racial narrative preferred by the media or the liberal and progressive voices that supposedly dominate it was picked up and shared all over Facebook and Twitter. And hey, maybe some of you have a parent or a sibling or an aunt or an uncle or somebody who posted something indignant about how unfair it is that nobody is talking about the murder of Canon Hinant, perhaps tagging it with something like hashtag say his name or hashtag justice for Cannon, or if they just decided to say fuck it and say the quiet part loud, hashtag white lives matter. There are a few problems with this, though. First of all, the premise that nobody is talking about this child's murder is just false. People are talking about it. It has been reported. Nobody is trying to bury this story. Was it as big of a story before it became a trending topic on social media? Was it as big of a story as, say, the killing of Ahmaud Arbery? No, it wasn't. But then again, the killing of Ahmaud Arbery wasn't a big story either until people started to make noise about it on social media. But I'll get to that in a second. The media wasn't necessarily treating the Canon Hinant story any differently because of the races of the individuals involved. The sad truth is, children being murdered in the United States is not that unusual. According to FBI crime statistics, over 1,100 people under the age of 18 were killed in the year 2018, which is the most recent year for which I could find detailed numbers. Of those 1,100 or so, 76 were between the ages of 5 and 8, the category into which Cannon will be counted. And not all of those 76 murders made national news. In fact, hardly any of them did. The killings that fueled the Black Lives Matter movement have involved particular circumstances that are absent in the Canon Hinant case. One thing they all have in common is that the killing in question went unpunished. That's why Ahmaud Arbery's story became such a popular topic on social media. People weren't just upset that this young man had been murdered, but also because nothing had been done about it. That's why the hashtags say her name and justice for Breonna exist in reference to the case of Breonna Taylor, not just because she was shot and killed in her own home by police who were attempting to carry out a drug raid at the wrong address, which would be outrageous enough on its own, but because in the months since that happened, the police who killed her have still not been charged with any crime. People haven't been tweeting, arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor, because the cops have already been arrested. That wouldn't make any sense. The killer of Canon Hinant, on the other hand, has been arrested. He was arrested shortly after committing the crime. He has been charged, and his day in court is next week. The system appears to be working as it is designed to work in this case. And that's a good thing. I doubt anyone supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement wishes that the killer of Canon Hinant was still free. That's not the point. The point is the killers of Breonna Taylor or Tamir Rice or Michael Brown or Eric Garner or any of the other black victims of police violence shouldn't still be free either. And let's not gloss over that bit about police violence, because the killer of little Cannon was a private citizen, not someone who had taken an oath to serve and protect the public. There's a little bit of a difference there as well. So how should you respond when you see people you know writing something indignant about the injustice of Canon Hinant's killing, framing it as an attack on the Black Lives Matter movement or efforts to address racism, police violence, and racial inequalities in the criminal justice system, generally speaking? What should you say when someone asks why people aren't as outraged about the killing of Cannon as they were about Ahmaud Arbery or Tamir Rice or Breonna Taylor? What should you say? I don't know. Maybe ask them why they aren't more outraged about the murder of Annabelle Green, a 5-year-old girl who was killed in Ohio last month. Or maybe ask why they aren't angrily tweeting about the murder of Destiny Oliver, who was killed in Knoxville, Tennessee last year, also 5 years old. Or ask them about Italia Brown, also 5, from Summerville, South Carolina, who was shot and killed in her own home 3 days before Cannon was killed. And by the way, yes, I had to look all of those up because none of them were national news. There are a lot of horrible crimes that take place, a lot of tragic killings that most of us never even hear about. The ones we do hear about that take place outside of our local area usually made national headlines for a reason, either because the crime itself was so shocking, or because the perpetrators have gone unpunished, or because the crime falls into a larger pattern that we should be aware of and concerned about. Cannon's killing wasn't being ignored any more than the killings of those other children I just mentioned were. There's no reason to demand justice for Cannon because justice seems to be working the way it's supposed to in this case. Pretending otherwise is just selective outrage, and it might be worth examining what you choose to be outraged about and why. Number 4, Kudlow gonna Kudlow. Hey, you know who's a piece of shit? Larry Kudlow. Larry Kudlow is the director of the United States National Economic Council and Trump's chief economic advisor, and he has been one of the White House's busiest talking heads for a while now, pretty much since he was appointed to his present office. Earlier this month, he appeared on CNN's State of the Union to defend a recent proposal from President Trump to institute a permanent cut in the payroll tax, and the payroll tax, of course, is what funds Social Security. And Kudlow's strategy for defending what Trump said is to insist that Trump didn't actually say that. He didn't mean that. That's not what he said. When CNN's Dana Bash asked Kudlow how Trump would be able to make the tax cut permanent without jeopardizing the programs it supports, Kudlow responded that actually what Trump meant to say was that he's going to make the deferral of the payroll tax established by his executive order permanent by forgiving the tax owed, instead of requiring people to pay it at the end of the deferral period. Now, this is not at all what Trump said, but it's what Larry Kudlow wants us to think Trump said, because that sounds better than permanently cutting the revenue source for one of the most popular and important social welfare programs in the country. A few days later, Kudlow appeared on CNBC, where he declared that Trump would not support any coronavirus relief bill that also includes measures designed to strengthen voting rights, saying that voting rights were an item to be found on, quote, liberal wish lists and were, quote, not our game. Kudlow made it sound as though Democrats were just throwing random, unrelated amendments about voting rights into the coronavirus bill. But of course, we've already talked about how the coronavirus pandemic has threatened the ability of people to safely exercise their right to vote. So supporting voting rights, such as through funding designed to facilitate mail-in voting, seems like exactly the sort of thing that ought to be in a coronavirus relief bill. But hey, maybe that's just me. Before we move on, I just want to go back to the first bit for a moment, because Kudlow's argument to Dana Bash was not the first time a Trump surrogate has tried to defend him by claiming that he didn't actually mean what he said. And I've talked about other instances where Trump surrogates have done this before in past editions of this very series. And I have to wonder, to all of the Trump spokespeople out there, and I know you're watching, don't you ever just get tired? I mean, yeah, you're all fucking garbage people, and if there is a hell, I hope every last one of you burns there forever for what you've done. But, like, don't you ever get tired of having to go on TV after the President of the United States says something fucking ridiculous and try to convince journalists with a straight face that he actually meant something completely different than what he said? It's been 3.5 years of this shit. Aren't you done with it yet? I know you're evil and all, but aren't you done with being humiliated like this yet? For Donald Trump? Jesus. Anyway, and now it's time for the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and/or endanger the United States and the rest of the world. It's number 5, the further misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. He doubled down on his racist housing-related tweet that I mentioned last time by tweeting, quote, "The suburban housewife will be voting for me. They want safety and are thrilled that I ended the long-running program where low-income housing would invade their neighborhood. Biden would reinstall it in a bigger form with Cory Booker in charge." Nicely done, because, last time he took credit for making it harder for black people to buy nice houses, and this time he flips it around to make it a threat. If Biden wins, not only is it going to be easier for black people to buy nice houses, but he's going to put a black guy in charge of it. A black guy whose name I can't even spell. There's no E in Cory. Donald. He announced he's considering an executive order requiring that health insurance cover pre-existing conditions. If that sounds familiar, that's because that is a requirement that already exists, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, the landmark piece of legislation that Trump has been trying to sabotage and dismantle for the last 3.5 years. He pushed for college football to resume play. Yes, that's the President of the United States, who has presided over the deaths of 170,000 people due to a viral pandemic, saying, while that pandemic is still raging, that he thinks it would be really great if they could play some football. He just likes it is all. He probably needs the distraction to take his mind off all the people he's killed. He said, and that's a joke, obviously, Trump isn't bothered at all by all the people he's killed because he doesn't have a conscience. He said, as part of his ongoing effort to scare people shitless about the completely normal and safe process of voting by mail, that a mail-in election might have a result that wouldn't actually be known for months or even years because all the ballots would be lost and they'd be so hard to count, yada, yada, yada. But the thing about that is, if the election result isn't certified by the end of Trump's term, which would be late January, it doesn't just roll over automatically. He doesn't just get to stay president if he isn't reelected officially with that result certified. His term is over. He's out. And then it just goes down the line of succession. And Pence would be next, but he's also out because his term would be up as well, which means the presidency would then fall to the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And after 4 years of this shit, I am totally fine with President Pelosi. So, you know what, Donald? Yeah, fuck it. I hope you're right. Anything to get the fuck rid of you. Last week, Rolling Stone reported that in 2018, Trump told the governor of South Dakota that it was his dream to have his face added to Mount Rushmore. That's sad enough. Ready to be a little sadder? In 2019, White House aides contacted the governor again to inquire as to the process of adding someone to Mount Rushmore. So just think how often Trump must bring that up in meetings if someone finally had to bite the bullet and make that utterly humiliating phone call. Christ, he's on about the Mount Rushmore thing again. I'd better just call and ask so he'll shut up about it. That's a fair price for my dignity, right? Not having to hear the president talk about this one thing anymore? What am I saying? I have no dignity. I work for Donald Trump. He reportedly wants to have a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin sometime before the general election. Golly, I wonder what that's about. And finally, last week, SV Date, White House correspondent for the Huffington Post, asked Trump during a press conference if he regretted how much he's lied to the American people these last 3.5 years. And Trump's response to that question was to A, pretend he hadn't heard the question, B, stare blankly into space for a second, and C, call on someone else without even attempting to answer it. It was a revealing and kind of thrilling moment, really, but the shame of it is that the reporter he called on next didn't just ask him the exact same question. Because as nice as it was to see a reporter finally confront Trump with the fact that he is the most shameless and prolific liar to ever occupy his office, all it really did was underline how much most of the press has allowed Trump to get away with all this time. It takes so little effort to call a liar by his name, and so little courage to do that in a room full of people who know it to be the truth just as well as you do. And yet here I am, almost 4 years after Donald Trump was elected president, talking about the first time a journalist called him a liar to his face and forced him to deal with it on television in front of everybody. And what did he do? How did he deal with it? He ran away. It's time to stop giving him places to run. And you might have noticed, I mentioned it earlier, I've been trying to suggest solutions to some of this stuff this time. Well, except for the Larry Kudlow segment, but really isn't ripping into Larry Kudlow's ass its own reward? I think so. Anyway, if holding Trump's feet to the fire is what journalists ought to be doing, what can we do? And there are lots of things we can do. First and foremost, we can vote this November. We can be engaged in the political process beyond voting at every level, including locally. We can take part in direct action. We can attend protests. We can help to organize. We can donate to support groups that are working to address problems that have been aggravated by Trump and his supporters. We can volunteer our time. But there's something else we can do, and something else we should do, and that is remember to take care of ourselves. It would be so easy to be overwhelmed by all of this. And hell, it would be easy to be overwhelmed by 1% of this. So remember to take a step back every now and then. Not permanently. Don't turn your back on the world. Too many people not giving a shit about what was going on past the tip of their own nose is one of the things that got us into this sorry state of affairs. But know when to give yourself a break. As Anne Lamott once wrote on Facebook, of all places, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. Well, stay tuned for the post show starting just in a minute. Until then, thank you for watching, everybody. That's 5. Speak out, act out, resist, look after each other. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the post show. So, actually, I see some random geek in the live chat mentioning the charity links. I will go ahead and mention them now up front, since yeah, that would have been an appropriate time to mention them, and I didn't. I just didn't. But there is a link to a Google Doc in the video description. And it takes you to a Google Doc where there is a compiling of charity links for many of our friends who need a helping hand. Speaking of direct action, sometimes that means just giving somebody some money, if they need some help, if they need a hand up. So if you can afford it, please consider donating to our friends at those charity links in that Google Doc compiled by our friend, Some Random Geek. Linked in the video description. Now, before I get any further, I want to give some shout outs to my newest Patreon patrons, and then I will turn my full attention to all you wonderful people in the live chat, and we will hang out for a little while. So first, let's do my newest $5 or more per month patrons, and their names are, actually, this doesn't look the way it's supposed to look. I really should have checked this. Oh, I know why. I know why it's like that. I'm gonna have to do something. I'm gonna have to improvise something live on the air. It's because somebody put a joke name in there, and that's the only one you can see. Let me see. If I make the font a lot smaller. Oh, that's not going to work. Jeff, you bastard. This is all your fault. I'm just going to read them straight from my script so I can shout out my new patrons. So bear with me for a moment. It's my fault, but it's also the guy who wrote that's fault. I'm gonna take some of the blame, but I'm not gonna take all of the blame. God damn it! So I can't show your names on screen. Actually, I think I can. I'll just do it this way. It won't be as nice looking. It won't be as nice looking, but you get to have like a little peek at what my script looks like, and some of you might enjoy that. So, okay, I'm going to share with you my web browser, and that is actually what my script for this show looks like in this part of it. Can you see my little note at the bottom where I remind myself to write jokes? But anyway, these are my newest $5 per month or more patrons, and their names are Mike Heron. Thank you, Mike. Eddie Yantis, thank you, Eddie. And here's the problem. Here's what fucked it all up. Someone left as their name for me to read out. Let me stop reading new patrons for a moment and confess my long-standing secret love affair with Mitch McConnell. Thank you very much, Jeff, for that. I appreciate that. And look, you see that? You fucked your own joke because you made it too long and you fucked it up. So the joke didn't even work. I hope you're happy. And seriously, thank you for your patronage. Judith Cardozo, thank you, Judith. And Space Monkey 73, thank you, Space Monkey 73. Christ, thank God that is over with. So, yes, how are we doing in the live chat? Let's talk. Jeremy Landry said the first comment I see in the live chat is Jeremy Landry saying, "I'm a bear and I'm with you, Steve." Thank you, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm glad. I'm very glad. Wellington Smith says, "I just wrote a thank you note to my representative for her voting to support the PO funding. I try to write to her weekly." That's great. That's great. I really think that more, I know I definitely should do it more often. I write to my representatives very occasionally. Like I've done it before, but it's not like a regular thing. But I feel like I probably should get into the habit of doing it more often, especially for important stuff like this. But just generally speaking, to let them know where I stand on issues, because I mean, it does play a role. It does make a difference. 255 AD says, "Why does Trump want the election called on the day? It's not like a week later we'd all just say, well, Biden got more votes, but we called it for Trump, so never mind." It's the TV thing. It's because he sees it as a TV show. He wants the election night drama. He wants to be able to sit on the couch and be watching TV and hear them call the race for Donald Trump that night. I guarantee you that's what it is. It's all about that. It's all about the drama and wanting it to be a TV show. That's 100% why he's like, what if we don't find out the election result on election night? That's totally what it is. Some Random Geek says, "Why do people trust political institutions so much?" Do they? I don't think it's so much. I don't think it's so much. I mean, I know there's a lot of distrust in political institutions as they are presently operating. And I think that's completely valid. I think that's completely justified. There are lots of government bodies and agencies. And I mean, for the most extreme example that a lot of us have been talking about for the last several months, just look at like police departments across the country. Like that is a government institution that a lot of people do not trust with very good reason. But why do people trust in the idea of political institutions, which I think is more what you're getting at? Like, why do we have political institutions? Why do we believe that they are useful? I mean, I think it's because when they are operated properly, they are extremely useful. They enable us to do things and accomplish things that would be very difficult to do without them. And I know as an anarchist you would disagree with that or have a different take on it, but I think that's what a lot of people think, and that's what I think, and I think that's why. That there is a difference between an institution being necessarily corrupt and an institution being corrupt right now, but there still being the possibility that it could operate, more fairly, more equitably, and actually be able to do the job that it's been given to do. So I think that's why people trust institutions. Did somebody ask about, Elbrash. Thanks, Dana, for pointing that out. Elbrash says, "Have you ever written fan fiction, and are you willing to admit it here? What is your favorite one?" Boy, have I got an announcement for you. First of all, yes, I have. And I read a piece of Star Trek fanfic that I wrote in a video that I posted. Has it been 2 years already? But I wrote a piece of Star Trek fanfic a while back, and I read it in a video. So yes, I'm willing to admit it. And also, guess what? I wrote a new piece of fanfic just last week, and it's a Batman fanfic, and I've written tons of Batman fanfic throughout my life, and I wrote a new one. It's actually more of a Robin Batgirl fanfic, but I'm going to read that in a special live stream tomorrow night, and starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm gonna read my new fanfic because as I mentioned it last Ask Away, I'm taking a little bit of a YouTube vacation. I'm not doing as many for about the next 2 weeks or so. I'm not really doing a lot of pre-recorded videos. I'm gonna do a couple of Star Trek videos, but other than that, I'm not really doing anything other than live streams. So in my free time, I have been writing this fanfic, and I finished it, and I think it's pretty good. And I one of the reasons, not the main reason, but one of the reasons I wrote it was because I did want to read it on a live stream because somebody suggested that. And Jessie Gender read some of her fanfic a while back on one of her live streams, and it seemed like a lot of fun. So yeah, I will admit to writing it, and tomorrow I am going to read it on a live stream, and it'll be great. And some random geek, yes, thank you. There's a link in the live chat right now to my Captain Picard fanfic called Stargazer. And it turned out really well. Did I get beeped? I don't think I did. But I didn't hear it anyway. Wellington Smith says, in a sense, the Ensign's log is fanfic. Right? Like, in a sense, the Ensign's log is Star Trek fanfic. And that's sort of what me and Jason are doing. Mr. Camerite says, what do you think of Lower Decks thus far? I really like it. The first 2 episodes I thought have been really, really good, really funny. Both of them so far have made me laugh out loud, and have had moments that just made me really, really happy, and I thought were really funny as a Star Trek fan. So yeah. No, I didn't get beeped. Who's gonna beep me? Nobody. Is YouTube beeping me? Hey, who's beeping me? Do I have to look? Nobody's beeping me. Okay, you see that? Nobody's beeping me. Seal0626 says, you put a slash between 2 characters' names. That means romance or sex. Don't blame me. That's the convention as established by Kirk/Spock, which was the subject of another great video by Jessie Gender. There is no sex in the Robin Batgirl story. There is no sex. There might be a teensy weensy, teensy itsy bitsy little bit of romance. Maybe. I don't want to spoil it. Maybe just a little bit. Just a little bit. 255 AD says, not that I want anything to happen to Biden. Was that convincing? But would the U.S. be better off if we could just have Harris take over right after the election? I don't know. I mean, in terms of policy, like, I really don't think it makes that much of a difference. I do think Harris is more naturally inclined to be inclined to be more progressive than Biden. So I guess it might be better in that sense. Harris might be a bit of a stronger personality, and is younger and maybe just a little more eager. But I don't know if in terms of policy, especially in terms of the policies that Biden is advocating right now, like if you go to Biden's website and look at his section on the issues and what he wants to do and all of the issues that are addressed and what he wants to do about them, it's a pretty progressive platform. Like if you assume that he will attempt to implement most of what he is saying he wants to do on his campaign website, it's a pretty progressive agenda that we can look forward to. Not of course, not as progressive as we might like, not as progressive as we might have hoped, back in the primaries, but pretty damn progressive. So I don't know if, in terms of policy, if Harris would be all that different than Biden. In terms of personality, in terms of other things, yeah, probably. But not enough for me to say, oh yes, we'd totally be better off if Biden just went away, Dana, yes, I know that Congress is made up of the House and the Senate. Which is why we have to win. We have to take back the Senate in the election as well, right? I think we're all agreed on that. We want like a bigger blue wave than we had in 2018, so we can not only keep a majority and hopefully even expand a majority in the House, but take a majority in the Senate as well. I'm not saying I'm not like expecting that to happen, but I mean, yeah, that would be great, and obviously that would be necessary for a progressive President Biden agenda to actually make it into law for sure. Sci-Fi 2285 says, "What do you think of Marge Simpson being forced to defend herself from Trumpists?" Never thought I'd have to say that. It just reminds me of how, how people can completely miss the point of shows they like. Like, I cannot imagine what a Donald Trump supporter would find in The Simpsons that speaks to them, but they do apparently, and they feel like entitled or comfortable, like saying, "Oh, Marge Simpson would say this," or Marge, and it's like, do you watch the show? How do you have any comprehension at all of the show? Secular Scholar asks, "Are you going, since you're taking a YouTube break, are you going to catch up on shows like Legion and Doom Patrol?" You know what? I probably should finally watch Legion. I haven't planned to watch Doom Patrol, but since I have been asked repeatedly to watch Legion, maybe I should, if I have time, I should catch up on Legion. But I am watching. Yes, there are shows that I am watching that I am sort of catching up on, and movies as well. I have finally gone back and I have filled in all of the holes in my my MCU watching. I've now seen every single MCU movie. I'd already seen most of them, obviously, but there were a couple that I had not seen yet. And I finally went back last week and I caught up on all of the MCU movies I haven't seen. So yeah. Didn't you ever watch the show? Jeremy says they think Homer being an oaf is aspirational. Yes, exactly. Douglas Chiron says, "Where do you see the United States going in the future?" That depends a lot on what happens in this election, doesn't it? If Biden and Harris win the election, I see things getting a little better over time, maybe trending upward like that. If Trump wins another term and has 4 more years to continue to push his authoritarianism and fascism, then I see it going down a lot steeper than that. I think a lot depends on where the election goes, for sure. Yeah, no, everybody's telling me to watch fucking Legion. Look, I'll watch it when I watch it, okay? Wellington Smith says, "Have you considered binging The West Wing just to pretend that there is a functioning White House somewhere?" I have thought about watching The West Wing for a while, and I just haven't had time to watch it. Because I remember watching it when it was originally on. And I didn't watch it religiously, and there was a lot of it that I missed, so there are big gaps in my West Wing watching. But I remember it fairly fondly. I remember, especially the earlier seasons, I thought it was a really good show. And yes, it would be nice to watch it and be like, "Oh, wouldn't it be just wonderful if there was a functioning government? If there was a functioning executive branch in the federal government? That would be great." 255 AD. What's so progressive about Biden's platform? So glad you asked. I actually was hoping somebody would ask that, because I will go to his website. And I will talk to you about it. I will show it to you right now. And then I'll answer the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. question, because someone asked about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I do want to talk about that, because the last episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was just this past week. So okay, you go to joebiden.com, and then here I'll show you my screen here. Okay, this is Joe Biden's website. All right. And because of the way I have it cropped, you can't see everything, but you can get the idea. So this is the Joe's Vision section, all right? And first of all, look at all of the topics that are covered here. There's a page with detailed plans and intentions behind each of these rectangles, all right? So this is an incredibly detailed agenda of what Biden would do if he becomes the president, all right? And let's just pick one. Let's just pick the Biden plan for housing and see how progressive it is. Just a random one. The Biden plan for investing in our communities through housing. So, as President, Joe Biden will invest $640 billion over 10 years so every American has access to housing that is affordable, stable, safe, and healthy, accessible, energy efficient, and resilient, and located near good schools with a reasonable commute to their jobs. Biden will do this by ending redlining and other discriminatory and unfair practices in the housing market, providing financial assistance to help hardworking Americans buy or rent safe quality housing, including down payment assistance through a refundable and advanceable tax credit, and fully funding federal rental assistance, increasing the supply, lowering the cost, and improving the quality of housing, including through investments in resilience, energy efficiency, and accessibility of homes, and pursuing a comprehensive approach to ending homelessness. Those are his priorities. And then down below that, you see there's all this detail, and there's detail about every single one of those. You know, when he says end redlining, and then there's a section behind every point where he goes into detail about exactly how are you going to end redlining? What does that mean? How are you going to provide financial assistance? What does that mean in detail? Okay, so we can go back to another one. Joe Biden's agenda for criminal justice reform. The Biden plan for strengthening America's commitment to justice. We can and must reduce the number of people incarcerated in this country. Our criminal justice system cannot be just unless we root out the racial, gender, and income-based disparities in the system. Our criminal justice system must be focused on redemption and rehabilitation. No one should be profiteering off of our criminal justice system. So I'm not going to go through his whole website for the rest of the show, but go to joebiden.com, go to the Joe's Vision section, and just look through the proposals. There's so many of them there. I haven't read all of them yet, but they go through in a lot of detail of what he intends to do or what he would like to do. And I think it's pretty progressive. Now, again, is it like a radical leftist anarchist revolution? No, it's not. It's not. And it's not like nobody ever expected Biden to be that far left, or, you know, and does it go as far even as Bernie Sanders would have gone? No, probably not. Does it go as far as Elizabeth Warren would have gone? Probably not. But it's pretty damn progressive, to the point that I really, really am getting sick of hearing people say, oh, Joe Biden is a Republican. Joe Biden is right wing. Read the kind of shit that he wants to do. Read the agenda that he is running on, and tell me that sounds like a Republican agenda. Because it doesn't even really sound like a centrist agenda to me. A lot of that stuff sounds pretty liberal, pretty at least left-leaning, if not left-wing. So that's why those are things that I think are progressive and, you know, about Joe Biden's agenda. And again, but, you know, read it for yourself. Go to the website, read it for yourself. Decide for yourself. Decide for yourself if you even believe it. Maybe you're someone who reads it and you say, well, that sounds good, but I don't think he's ever actually going to try to do that. Okay, that's up to you. But based on what he's saying, based on the platform that he is putting forward and saying this is the kind of president I would be if I win the election, I think that it's a pretty progressive agenda. So there. Now, somebody asked me about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. an hour and a half ago before I started going through Joe Biden's website. I love Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I thought the last 2 episodes were beautiful. There was a moment in it that I've already, Dana's in the chat. I already talked to Dana about it. I talked to a couple other people about it on Facebook as well. That there's a moment in the final episode, and I don't want to spoil it, but where the heroes are able to defeat the bad guys, not by overwhelming force, not by killing everybody, but by giving them empathy. And that, oh God, that hit me so hard. It's just such, and it's a very Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, you know, where they find a way to win the day by giving the bad guys empathy, by giving the bad guys the ability to care about other people, you know. And there's just something so beautiful about that. So I really liked, and I love the way the characters ended up. I love the little beats that they gave everybody at the end to sort of show us where they are now at the end of the show. I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was wonderful, and I thought it was a great. Yeah, I know Dana didn't like that. I admit it's an easy thing. because in real life it would be more complicated than that. But just as a way of defeating the bad guys, I thought it was nice. So yeah. John Ginger says, he says, I don't know. Pence sent me an email saying that with the addition of Harris, the Biden-Harris ticket is radical left. Also, if I send them $10, I'll get free Trump-Pence stickers. Free if I send them $10. Okay. that's like the perfect Trump pitch, right? Send me $10 and I'll send you free stickers. 255 AD says, when Democrats do token gestures of resistance like ripping paper, should we defend them if the right attack them for it, or do we have better issues to fight about? I think that's up to you. I mean, it's hypocritical for the right to attack people for token gestures when the right enjoys its token gestures just as well. So I mean, I think it's fair to defend them against that, but I think it's also important to remind them that we need more than token gestures. You know what I mean? Like Nancy Pelosi tearing up Donald Trump's State of the Union speech was great. I thought it was a great moment. But that moment in and of itself doesn't really accomplish anything. Now, if it is a symbol of rebellion and resistance that is then carried through legislation that does something positive or thwarts Trump from doing something bad, then that's great. But if she's just tearing up a speech just to say, like, to have like a viral moment, then no, that's not good at all. But no, I think it's fair to defend them for that stuff, of course. Crud Butts, your new hat looks stellar. Thank you. I like my new hat. My old son's hat was getting a little weathered, a little haggard looking, and I could not find another black son's hat, another black fitted son's hat in my size. So what I decided to do was make myself a custom hat. So I got this patch that I'll hold it up to the camera. You can see it is the original logo for NASA. Before they switched to the meatball logo that they currently use. And I think they still use this logo in some instances, like for formal occasions or something. But that was the original NASA logo when NASA was established in the 50s. And I got a patch of it, and I got a blank fitted cap, and I attached it. I sewed it onto the front, and there you go. That's my new hat. Thank you very much. I also ordered a Baltimore Orioles hat that I might wear from time to time, too. I don't know. Depends. But yes, thank you. Thank you for noticing the new hat. I like it, too. I know, Dana, the idea that you can just give somebody empathy is cheap. I know. We've been over this. But it was a nice moment, so there. 255 AD says, I prefer to say Biden is a 1970s Republican. Is that better? That's better. Yeah, that's better. I don't think Biden is any kind of Republican. Were Republicans in the 1970s running for president on a platform that included subsidized housing? Like, were Republicans in the 1970s talking about LGBTQ rights and racial justice and criminal justice reform? Maybe they were, but I don't think they were. Like, I think if you look at the platform, if you look at what he is actually promising to do, I don't think he is any kind of Republican. 70s, 80s, 90s, today, whatever. I think that is a completely false talking point, that Biden is a Republican. I will agree with people. I do think that he is a little too comfortable working with Republicans. I think he romanticizes bipartisanship a lot. Way too much in the present climate, when I think bipartisanship is probably at best a waste of time, and at worst something that is dangerous to pursue, because you could end up empowering Republicans who have shown that they really don't give a fuck, that they will burn this whole fucking place down if it gets them a few more pennies in their pocket. I think that's a problem with Biden. I think Biden has an old-fashioned view of how things are, in terms of how the parties relate to each other and stuff like that. But in terms of his agenda that he's running on, I don't think that is in any way a Republican agenda at all. And if you want to make the argument that, like I said, maybe he doesn't mean it or he's just saying it, okay, but I don't take that view. I don't think it is in any stretch a Republican agenda. Crudbutts, did you see Trump tweeted save the post office? Did he? I didn't notice that. Bless his heart. Um, Yeah, it's, Spike Bolin says, a friend of mine put it best. Who would you rather protest for the next 4 years, Trump or Biden? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's something. It's something to keep. Hi, David. David's late, but David's here. It's something. It is something to keep in mind. You know that. I mean, we are still going to have to push Biden to make sure he does the right thing. You know, it won't be it shouldn't, and it should never be a matter of, oh, we won the election, let's all go home, see you in 4 years. Like that should never be the case. We should be involved in our political process as much as we can be every step of the way. We should be at a very basic level, we should be paying attention to what is happening. And that doesn't mean that you have to watch C-SPAN all day, but you should read the news. You should keep up with what's going on. You should be informed on the issues and informed as to what your representatives are doing about it or where they stand about it. You should keep in touch with them. You should write them and email them and maybe call them, you know, and let them know what you think about things. Let them know that you, a voter, a supporter possibly of theirs, someone who lives in their constituency, have this position on a thing, and this is important to you. Keep involved, you know, go to town meetings, go to town halls, make your voice be heard. Use social media to spread your message and to speak out, you know, stay involved in the political process beyond just voting. It's incredibly important. So, I mean, as much as I'm going to be harping between now and November on saying, you know, vote for Biden and Harris, you know, defeat Trump in the election, like that can't be the only thing you do. You have to remain involved as much as possible, remain informed and remain involved. David Colby says, the worry I get is people screaming go vote or ignoring the fact that we may need to do more than just vote. I agree. And I do think that here's the thing here, and I sympathize, and then I also have a criticism of it. Voting is, for most people, voting is the easiest way and the clearest way to involve yourself in the political process. Now, voting is not easy for everybody, not how it should be. You know, there are places in the country where there are obvious attempts to suppress the vote, to block people from voting, and that's been going on for years, and that needs to stop immediately, and it'll never stop while Republicans are in office. But that's an issue that needs to be dealt with. But even despite that, voting is the easiest way for most people to take part in the political process. And even so, it is so fucking hard to get people to vote. Right? Voting turnout in this country is a fucking embarrassment. It is so hard to get people to vote. And voting is so easy. Voting is so easy. So I sympathize with people who focus on go vote, right? Because voting is the easiest thing you can do to take part in the political process. And it's still fucking impossible to get people to do it. And so the mindset is, well, shit, if we can't even get people to vote once every 2 years for federal elections, how the fuck are we going to motivate them to do more than voting? So I get why a lot of the focus is on turning out the vote, right? But by the same token, voting all by itself is not enough. Now, maybe if more people voted, voting would be able to accomplish more than we can accomplish with it now. Like maybe voting would be even more effective if more people voted. But until that happens, voting by itself is not enough. And it probably never will be enough. Voting by itself would probably, even with 100% voter turnout, voting by itself would never be enough. There needs to be more involvement than just voting. But I sympathize with people who focus on turning out the vote because of how fucking hard it is to get people to go out and vote. And Surrender Geek says unionize. I agree 100%. I agree 100%. Labor unions are one of the most, are the most powerful tool for working people to to organize and to advocate for their rights. And it's incredibly important. Unionize, organize, absolutely. Death Star says, thoughts on the new animated Star Trek series. I guess you missed it. I talked about that already. But briefly, I think it's really good so far. We're only 2 episodes in, but I really like it so far. Oh, Dana, that's a great idea. We should organize and have free baked goods at polling stations. Everyone loves cupcakes. And you know what else? You have also said, I don't know if you've mentioned it in the chat so far, but you've told me before that one of your ideas is to actually pay people to vote, which I think is a very provocative idea. And I mean, you are doing a civic duty. You are doing your community a service by voting. So you should be paid a token sum to go vote. I think that's a really interesting idea. John Hammond says, I'm legit scared that between Trump's regular cronies and these QAnon dumb fucks, we might be facing another civil war here soon. What are your thoughts on this? I will not say that I'm not at all concerned. I'm a little worried about that, but I'm not seriously worried about it because I really don't know if enough people are actually going to get up off their ass to fight a civil war. I feel like I'm resting my hopes on the apathy of the American people in this case. I don't know if enough. QAnon is a keyboard warrior thing. Yes, there have been. It's serious enough. There have been instances where people linked to QAnon or motivated by QAnon have actually gone out into the real world and done stuff. So I don't want to completely write that off because that has happened. But in general, QAnon is a keyboard warrior thing. QAnon is an internet thing. And I just don't see QAnon conspiracy theorists or other sort of hardcore Trump supporters like that being the people to go out and fight in a civil war. And I hope I'm right about that. Siamak says, I support unionizing, but how do we avoid things like the police unions? If I ever finish the script, I have a video in the works about police unions that I would like to do. Maybe it'll be one of the first videos I do when I come back from my YouTube vacation. But I have been working on a script for a video about the difference between police unions and other types of labor unions, and basically why. Because if you look into the subject, you find that most police unions do not have close ties to the rest of organized labor. The largest police unions, there are police unions that are members of organized labor organizations, but the largest police unions, like the Police Benevolent Association in New York City and other places like that, are not affiliated with organized labor at all. They're called unions. They operate as unions to a point, but they are not the same. So there are some important differences between what we would normally think of as a union, like the Teamsters or something, or like, the NEA and a police union. So that's a really interesting subject to talk about. And I mean, how do you avoid it? I don't know. I mean, I think you have to, I don't think you can avoid it by just not allowing people to organize. That's not the way to avoid it. The way to avoid things like police unions, you can't just say, well, you can't organize. Because if police departments in the country were better, then cops forming labor unions to advocate for their rights would be perfectly fine. That's what you would want. You'd want all workers to have the right to organize and to collectively bargain for their rights and for fair compensation and all of that. Like, that's what you want. The problem isn't police. The problem with police unions is the way police departments are operated. And a lot of those problems, go back decades and decades and decades. And the police union is affected by them, but the police union is not. And the police union today acts to protect them and reinforce them and make them much more difficult to reform. But the police union is not necessarily the original cause of them, if you know what I'm saying. 255AD says, police unions are just like regular unions. Every time my brother kills a child, the teachers union defend him. Not sure how many times your brother has killed children and gotten away with it, but there are, I will say this, there are similarities, but there are also differences. And one of the major differences between police unions and other forms of labor unions that I have noticed in doing research for this video, especially teachers unions, because teachers unions were sort of the representative example of other forms of organized labor that I took in my video to talk about to contrast with police unions. There are similarities, because one of the basic things that labor unions do is to stand up for their members, right? And police unions do that, and so do teachers unions. But teachers unions also take positions and advocate for policies and lobby for legislation that is designed not necessarily just to benefit teachers, but also to benefit students and also to benefit society as a whole. And it's really difficult, if not impossible, to find police unions, to find major police unions with large numbers of members doing the same thing. Police unions, when they advocate for political causes, it is almost always for issues that are designed to cover the asses of bad cops and to protect police from consequences of their actions. That is almost the entirety of police union political activity. And that is not the case with teachers unions. Not at all, that I have found. And it was a joke. Of course it was. I get jokes. Luke Inga, YouTube vacation? Well, not entirely, obviously. I'm here. Let me see. Siamak says, where I think unions run into trouble is when they defend numbers of jobs rather than worker protection. Yeah, I would agree with that. That sounds legit. Yeah. There are lots of ways that, there are lots of ways that labor unions are imperfect. And of course, they are susceptible to corruption. And there have been, very high profile instances in the past where they've become entangled with organized crime and all kinds of other things, and where they have acted to protect members that have legitimately done really, really bad things that they should not be protected for. Labor unions, not just police unions, but labor unions of all kinds are susceptible to doing bad things. So it would never be my argument to say, no, labor unions are perfect. It's not. But they are the best tool that workers have to protect themselves. 255 AD says, should we judge progressiveness based on American standards or international standards? Biden would be conservative if you dropped him in the EU or even the UK. I think American politicians should be judged by American standards, at least within the context of American politics. If someone from the UK wants to point out that the alignment is different over there and that our liberals would fit better with their conservatives, that's great. It's a perfectly valid thing to point out. But I don't think it really accomplishes a whole lot, within the context of American politics to constantly do that. I think pointing it out every once in a while is fine, so that us Americans remember that we are not the center of the universe and that actually things are different in other countries than they are here, and that the way we do things and that the way things are here right now is not a natural state, and things can be different than how they are if we make them so, and because that's the way things are over there and over there and over there. But other than that, I don't really think it accomplishes a whole lot to constantly be going on about how, Biden is actually, if this were the UK, Biden would be a Tory. Okay, but it's not, Random Geek says, Elon Musk boasted, we will coup whoever we want, deal with it. In regards to Bolivia, is the U.S. just the biggest threat to world peace then? Yeah, kinda. I don't know if you would say we're the biggest threat to world peace, but we certainly have not been bashful at all about meddling in the affairs of other countries for our own selfish interests. So, I think, and Elon is sort of pitching it there as a good thing. Yeah, we're America. We'll overthrow any government we want. Do something about it. It's not a good thing at all. And he's sort of framing it as a good thing. But, no, it's... No, the United States, yes, I should say, the United States has been a threat to world peace in the past, or at the very least has been a threat to the sovereignty and the integrity of other nations, for sure. The Might one says the problem is that the militarization of the American police began back in the 90s with Bill Clinton. Yeah, that's true. That is. I think that's been talked about a lot. One of the most unfortunate legacies of the Clinton administration was the crime bill and the law and order rhetoric and the militarization of police. Absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Robert Mills says, shut your mouth. Of course America is the center of the universe. Trump says the magical Skyman says so. The magical Skyman, the Trump, I guarantee you, Trump has never met him. Even if God existed, God would be like, Trump? No, we've never talked. Like, there's no fucking way. Viper 60,000. Now that's a good point. If you're saying it to respond to someone, if someone is saying like, oh, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are radical leftists. I mean, they're not even radical leftists by American standards, to be honest. I just got them saying like how progressive they are, but I don't think even by American standards, it's ridiculous to say that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are radical leftists. But yeah, if you're going to use it as a response to that and say like, no, internationally speaking, they're not even to the left. They're in the center or even a little to the right. Like, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Danis asks Robert if he's ever heard me sing. I have sung in Stephen Stuffy episodes before. Not terribly well, and I do not fancy myself a singer, but I have sung from time to time. I am not, you might say, I am not a singer, but I am a person who sings every once in a while. Dataport Doll says God would tell Trump vanity is a sin, and Trump would be in the press room the next day calling God fake news. You're goddamn right he would. Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yes, that's exactly how it would go. That's exactly how it would go. Did I sing? Yes, I did sing in the 7 of... I sing in the 7 of 9 video. I sing a line from Hamilton in, well, I forget which video it is. It's earlier than the 7 of 9 video. It's a couple. It might be is it the Wharf video? There's an earlier Trek Actually video where I do a little bit of a song from Hamilton, and yes, and in the 7 of 9 video, yeah. Some random geek says, I fear that Biden will get elected on a progressive platform and go back to the right once in office, just like with Clinton and Obama. Well, I don't think it's fair to say Clinton and Obama governed as conservatives. As we just talked about, there are some things that Clinton did as president that I would not, that I didn't support and don't support and wish he hadn't done, like militarization of police, and the crime bill, and increasing penalties for certain crimes and stuff like that. So I don't think, and same thing with Obama, and especially with Obama's foreign policy. You can't say that he was all that progressive, but I think it's reductive to say, oh, he just, he governed from the right. I really don't think he did. I think it's reductive to say that. And hopefully Biden will not be allowed to do that. Like hopefully the Democrats and we the people will not allow Biden to do that if he tries to do that. But we'll just have to see. Some random geek says, are you in favor of imperialism? Or why should we have 12,000 troops in Germany? Why do we need to have a show of force? No, I'm not in favor of imperialism. And I think I addressed this in a previous show. If Germany doesn't want us to have the 12,000 troops, then they shouldn't be there. If Germany, as our ally, wants them to be there or sees a mutual benefit to them being there, either as a show of force or just as defense, as protection, or as to give us the ability to respond rapidly if there is a situation in that region that legitimately demands an American response, then I have no problem with that at all. I see that as sort of an exchange, as us and our ally, in this case Germany, reaching an agreement where we would have troops stationed there. You know, but if Germany decides that we should get the fuck out, then we should get the fuck out. Tony Fly says, but Steve thinks that God is fake news. I guess I kind of do. Yeah, as an atheist, I guess I kind of do. Serenum Geek, I think it might be more fair to say that Clinton governed economically as a conservative than Obama did. I mean, you have to remember also, like, Obama had for most of his presidency had a Republican Congress that gave him absolutely nothing. And even with that, I think he still managed to do okay economically, and managed to pass certain reforms, especially early in his administration when he was dealing with the 2008 economic crash, that I don't think you could say were conservative measures. Now, was he as liberal or as progressive as he could have been? No. And the same thing with Clinton. And I think Clinton's problem was that he got addicted to triangulation, where he wanted to have legislative victories. He wanted to pass legislation so he would have a record, of accomplishment. And I think that led him to go more to the right, more to the conservative side than he should have. But no, even with that, I don't think it's fair. I think it's reductive. I think it's really simplistic to say that their economic policies were conservative. I don't think they were. I think they were in some instances, but overall, no, I don't think they were. I really don't. I mean, was the bailout and the Recovery Act a conservative thing? I mean, we can argue as to whether the bailout was appropriate, whether the bank should have gotten all that money, but I mean, spending all those billions and billions of dollars of government money, in a massive new federal program designed to rescue the economy from disaster, like that certainly isn't a right-wing proposal. Like that is not a right-wing policy. That is a liberal big government idea. And we can argue over whether or not it was a good idea, whether or not the money was, and I certainly think we can argue that the money was not directed to the right people. I would much rather have seen a bailout for everyday citizens who were suffering as a result of that economic crash than the banks and, whose policies and executives had in large part caused it to happen. But that's, the point is, the bailout itself was, I don't think you can say that was a conservative policy. And that was one of the signature economic policies of Obama's administration. Yes, and bank regulation. So I saw Bomber Fox talking about ending bank regulation under the Clinton administration. Yeah, that's a big one too. Absolutely. Yeah. 255 AD says, do liberals find it patronizing when we treat you as something we need to convert? It depends. Not always. But yes, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. Not always. But it depends on the tone and it depends on the approach. But it can seem patronizing, sure. Yeah, I know. The Mite one says, they're coming for Steve. Yeah, I think that was a fire truck. Yes, the cops are coming for my commie butt. Exactly. Hi, Duralta Trekkie. Casino Macul says, hi Steve, Javier here. During the last Facepalm 5, my partner, Melissa the Librarian, became a patron, and tonight so did I. I look forward to voting for future Trek Actually videos. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Welcome. 255 AD says, how would Stuffy feel about making the homeless shelter into a commune? I don't know how Stuffy would feel about that. See, I don't know. I haven't thought through Stuffy's politics to that point. I don't think Stuffy is a communist. I think he is extremely progressive, and he is extremely concerned about like humanitarian questions, and he's extremely concerned about things like economic justice and racial justice and stuff like that. I don't know if Stuffy is that far left. But then again, I don't know if he would have a huge problem with it either if he thought that it would benefit, the people at the shelter. I'm not sure. Robert Mill says it'd be easier for the cops to grab you during a traffic stop than trying to raid your home. Well, don't give them any ideas. What if they're monitoring this live stream? Thanks, Robert. Jesus. 255 AD says, thoughts on labor vouchers. Thomas is doing a Q&A tomorrow, and I decided to ask him about the idea of replacing money with non-transferable vouchers. Why would that be better? Like, why would that be better than money? I'm not sure what the benefit of that would be. Some random geek, Joe Biden has said to Wall Street, you have nothing to fear. That is a strong signal to me that no matter what Joe Biden wants to do, Wall Street has to approve. Well, that would be something that we need to push him on, right? That will be something that we need to, if there is, let's say, a piece of legislation that is about to be passed or that has been passed and is sent to Biden's desk, and it would be of great benefit to working people or great benefit to, somebody, but Wall Street is saying, can't do that. Like, we need to make sure that Biden signs the fucking thing. I mean, that's what it comes down to. The president can't write legislation. The president can't govern exclusively by executive order. The president, one of the president's most important roles, arguably the most important role of the president, is to be the one who signs legislation, who executes the laws that have been passed. And as long as Biden signs the right stuff and doesn't sign the wrong stuff, he'll do a pretty good job. So if a bill to regulate Wall Street or to crack down on Wall Street abuses or excesses or that would benefit people other than Wall Street and Wall Street doesn't like it, if that bill comes to Biden's desk and he's like, gee, I don't know if I should sign this, like, that's where the test comes, and I guess we'll just have to see. Spike Bolin with the super chat. Thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate that. Yeah, okay, you're right, Dana. He can write legislation. He can't enact it by himself. That's what I meant. He cannot create laws by himself. So he's perfectly free to write a bill and send it to Congress and say, could you please pass my bill? I wrote the best bill. Can you imagine if Trump wrote a bill? It would be like 2 pages written in Sharpie. And it would be like incomplete sentences. And it would just be like, this bill says that Donald Trump will be president forever. And then he throws in like a hereby or something because he heard that laws have to have the word hereby. And hereby, Donald Trump is president for life. And then he sends it to Congress. And he's like, why won't they pass my bill? Deralta Trekkie says, I watched the Tempest 2-parter Meet John Doe and Lois and Clark's on DVD and found it quite eerie to see how a pompous jackass turned into the president. Yeah, it's a little prophetic, isn't it? And of course now Superman supports the real life pompous jackass who became president. It's great. That's a really good episode. All the Tempest episodes of Lois and Clark are great, aren't they? But yeah, that 2-parter where Tempest becomes president is like, it's so good. It's so good. Sci-Fi 2285, who would you appoint to investigate Trump after he leaves office? Because the last guy we got to do the job didn't work out too well. Who should be the one to investigate Trump after he leaves office? That's a good question. That's a real good question. Sally Yates. Sally fucking Yates. That's who it should be. Or no, who was Loretta Lynch. There you go. Obama's last attorney general. I had to look up. I couldn't remember her name. Loretta Lynch. That would be a good one. Yeah, something like that. Crudbutt says Trump thought executive order was a double Big Mac and large fries. That's funny. Oh, that's funny. Oh, God. Oh, 255 AD. Okay, if they're non-transferable, you can't hoard wealth. Well, that might be an advantage. Although, if we just taxed motherfuckers the way we should, they couldn't hoard wealth either. So you could just do it that way also. Dana says he would have the Sharpie on his nose from sniffing it. Yes, exactly. Mr. President, what's this? Is this? Oh, it's nothing. Forget it. You should. He can write a bill but not introduce it. Yes, yes, yes. Socialist Ether says Hillary to investigate. Payback for the lock her up. Yeah, and Hillary was a lawyer. So, I mean, it's not like she has no expertise in that area. And that would be a giant fuck you. Like if Biden appointed like a special investigator or a special prosecutor to investigate Trump and he appointed fucking Hillary to do it, like that would be like, that's right. What do you think of that, buddy? I would still prefer one of the people I mentioned, but that Hillary would be funny. Hillary would be funny. Yeah, Trump's legislation would be my hands are big. Trump's legislation would be the crowd at my inauguration was the biggest ever, and my electoral college victory was by a historic margin, and nobody thought I could ever do it. Yeah. Okay, so it is 7:30. I've been going for an hour and a half. We've had a nice post show here, so I'm going to wrap this up for tonight. But I want to remind everybody, first of all, before I go, I want to remind you of the Patreon page that you can go to support my work here on this channel. Patreon.com/Steve Shives. $5 a month or more gets you a shout out. A pledge of any amount gets you access to the patron feed where you can vote for Trek Actually video topics and you can leave questions for future Ask Away videos. There's all kinds of stuff for being a patron at any level. Big hands, he thinks he's the one. Also, don't forget that I co-host a couple of podcasts with the brilliant and hilarious Jason Harding at LetMeListenPodcast.com. You can listen to the Late Seating Podcast, wherein we review classic films. The most recent episode of that went up on this past Friday. It's our review of the Lou Gehrig biopic starring Gary Cooper, Pride of the Yankees. And you can also listen to our Star Trek-themed comedy podcast called The Ensign's Log. A new episode of that is going up on Friday. Another super chat from Crudbutts. Thank you, my friend, very much. Also, don't forget the charity links, once again, that are in the description of the video that are put together by our good friend Some Random Geek. Help out some of our friends in the charity links if you can afford it, to give people who are having a hard time a helping hand. We would all really, really appreciate it. And I was going to say something. Oh, and don't forget also, I mentioned earlier during the first portion of the show, if you are a fellow American, please, seriously, consider writing your representatives and your senators. And there is a website linked at the very top of the description of this video where if you don't happen to know who your senators and who your member of Congress is, you can just enter your address and it will tell you who they are and how to get in touch with them. And just write them an email or call them or write them a letter. Let them know about the post office funding situation was what I was talking about. But just let them know what you think about anything. You know, if there's a particular piece of legislation that you know about that you want to make sure they vote for or vote against, like just get involved. Get involved in the political process, please. And also don't forget about the memes that I mentioned. You can go back and seek back and get the details on that. But if you want to make a meme responding to President Trump's birther conspiracy about Kamala Harris, and share it on social media, and then also let me know about it. If a bunch of you do it, and some of them are really good, I'll share the best ones in the post show of the next Facepalm 5. So don't forget about that. And don't forget also that tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern, I will be reading my Robin and Batgirl fanfic on a live stream. I read it out loud a couple days ago to sort of time it, and it takes about an hour to get through all of it. So hopefully you will enjoy it. Hopefully you'll come back for that and listen to me reading my fanfic that I wrote last week, and I'm really, really pleased with it. And yes, not only will I admit to writing fanfic, I will read some of it for you live. So I will see you tomorrow evening, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern for that. And then I'll see you also this coming Friday for another Ask Away. So that's it for now, everybody. Thank you all so much for being with me and hanging out in the chat. And I will see you tomorrow. So thanks for watching. Take care, everybody.